My name is Antony. I'm 85 years old, and for a long time I was terrified of losing myself. It started with little things. Forgetting where I had placed my glasses, leaving the kettle boiling until the water hissed away. Sometimes I'd walk into the kitchen and just stand there, staring at the counter, no idea why I'd gone in. At first, I laughed it off. That's just age, right? That's what my friend said too. But deep down, I wasn't laughing. Deep down, I was scared. You see, I grew up in a time when memory was everything. My generation didn't have smartphones to remind us, no devices to keep track of our lives. We had our minds, and our minds were enough. But suddenly, mine wasn't. One day, my granddaughter Sophie asked, "Grandpa, do you remember the story about the day you met Grandma?" I froze. My throat tightened. For the first time in my life, the memory of that beautiful day didn't come. It was like a piece of me was gone. And it wasn't just the stories. I started forgetting names, of neighbors I had known for decades, of friends who had shared my table. The look in their eyes, when I stumbled and searched for their names, was like a mirror reflecting back the truth. I was slipping away. The shame was unbearable. I stopped answering phone calls. I declined invitations. I even skipped my church group meetings. It was easier to stay home than to risk embarrassing myself again. At night, I would lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering, is this how it begins? Is this the slow unraveling that ends with me not even knowing my own children's faces? And you know what's worse? That heavy silence in the room when your loved ones realize you've forgotten something important. Their eyes soften with pity, but pity hurts. I told myself I was strong, that I could handle it. But the truth was, I was disappearing. And maybe you felt that too. Maybe you've walked into a room and suddenly thought, why am I here? Maybe you've searched for a word that used to come easily, but now feels locked away in some dark corner of your mind. If so, I know your fear. I know your shame. And I want you to stay with me, because what happened next changed everything. It wasn't just small slips anymore. My memory problems began to creep into every corner of my daily life, like shadows growing longer at dusk. I started forgetting appointments, important ones. My daughter Emma had arranged for me to meet a new doctor. She'd even written it on a big note and taped it to the fridge. But the day came, and I didn't show up. When she called me, her voice was tight with worry. "Dad, you promised. You told me you'd go. Do you even remember?" I didn't. The note was still there, staring back at me, accusing me. I felt like a child who couldn't be trusted to take care of himself. And then there were the bills. Electricity, gas, even the phone. I used to be meticulous, proud of never missing a payment. But one evening, I opened a letter from the utility company. Final notice. My stomach dropped. I couldn't believe it. Me, Antony, the man who once balanced checkbooks without even using a calculator, was now forgetting to pay for light and heat. It's a strange thing, how memory loss eats away at dignity. It's not only the big moments, it's the small humiliations that pile up. Like standing in the grocery store, holding a carton of milk and wondering, did I already buy this yesterday? Do I even need it? Or walking down the street, and for one terrifying instant, not recognizing my own neighborhood. I used to take long walks every morning, the rhythm of my feet on the pavement, the cool air filling my lungs. That was my ritual, my peace. But soon, even that became a battlefield. One morning, halfway through my usual route, I froze. The houses looked familiar, but something was wrong. Left, right. My mind spun like a compass gone mad. For a moment, I thought I was lost in my own town. A neighbor spotted me standing there, confused. She smiled kindly. "Morning, Antony. Everything all right?" I forced a laugh. "Oh, just taking in the view." But inside, I felt like I was crumbling. And then The worst of all, family gatherings. My grandchildren would run into my arms, bubbling with stories. But sometimes, their names slipped. I'd call Sophie Sarah. I'd mix up Ethan and Daniel. Their little brows would furrow, confused, and Emma would quickly change the subject to cover for me. But I saw it, that flicker of disappointment in their eyes. It broke me. I began avoiding dinners, sitting quietly at the table, pretending to focus on my food while the conversation danced around me. My world grew smaller and smaller, like a shrinking circle of light, until most days were spent in silence. One night, I overheard Emma talking to her husband in the kitchen. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "He's not the same anymore. He's slipping away. I don't know how much longer we have him like this." I wanted to shout, "I'm still here. I'm still me." But the truth was, I wasn't sure. It was like I was disappearing piece by piece. And maybe you know that feeling too. Maybe you've felt the world get smaller because your mind doesn't cooperate anymore. Maybe you've sat in silence while others carry the conversation, afraid you'll forget something simple, something obvious. That's how it was for me, day after day. The shame, the loneliness, the fear. I kept thinking, is this it? Is this how my story ends, fading away inside my own body? But little did I know, the lowest point was still waiting for me. There's always that one moment, the one you never forget, even when your memory betrays you. For me, it was a cold winter morning. I woke up and sat at the edge of my bed, staring at my shoes, simple black shoes I had worn 1,000 times before. But that day, I couldn't remember how to tie them. The laces tangled in my trembling hands. I pulled, I twisted, I fumbled. Minutes passed, my breath grew heavy, my eyes burned, and then I just sat there staring down at my untied shoes, tears streaming silently down my face. "I can't even dress myself anymore," I whispered. That's when it hit me, like a crushing weight pressing down on my chest. Maybe this is the beginning of the end. I didn't want Emma or the kids to see me like that, so I stayed in my room. I told them I wasn't feeling well, but the truth was, I couldn't bear the humiliation of asking my daughter to tie my shoes like I was a child again. The days that followed were darker than ever. I started refusing invitations, Sunday lunches, birthdays, even Christmas Eve. The laughter of my family felt like a world I no longer belonged to. I was an outsider, looking in through a frosted window. And at night, when the house was silent, I found myself asking questions I never thought I'd ask. What's the point of going on if I can't even remember who I am? Am I becoming a burden to everyone I love? Would it be kinder to them if I just faded away quietly? One night, I looked at the old photo albums, the black and white pictures of my youth, of the day I married Clara, the trips we took, the family we built together. And for the first time, some faces didn't bring back any memories at all. They were just strangers in frames. I closed the album and buried my face in my hands. My shoulders shook as I cried silently. I didn't recognize myself anymore. The strongest man in my family, the one who fixed everything, who carried everyone, was now the weakest. And maybe you felt something like that too. That moment when the simplest task feels impossible, when you catch yourself thinking, what's left of me now? That's where I was, at the bottom. And yet, life has a way of surprising us. Because just when I thought I had reached the end of the road, when the silence in my room felt heavier than ever, something unexpected happened. A conversation, a simple moment, the kind that seems small at first, but ends up changing everything. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. I wasn't looking for answers anymore. I was too tired, too defeated. Emma had insisted that I come with her to the local farmer's market. "Just for some fresh air, Dad. It'll do you good." I didn't want to go. I didn't want to be around people, but she was persistent, and so I gave in. The market was alive with colors: crimson apples stacked high, golden honey glistening in glass jars, baskets of leafy greens that smelled of earth and rain. I walked slowly, leaning on my cane, letting Emma lead the way, and then I heard a familiar voice. "Antony, is that really you?" I turned. It was Clara, an old neighbor I hadn't seen in years. Her eyes sparkled, her arms open wide. She hugged me tight, as if no time had passed at all. We began to talk. Well, she talked. I listened, nodding, hoping I wouldn't embarrass myself by forgetting details. But then, as we were about to part, she tilted her head and asked gently, "Tell me something, Antony. Have you ever tried blueberries?" I chuckled, confused. "Blueberries? Of course I've had them, but not lately. Why do you ask?" She smiled knowingly. "They've been my secret for years. I read about them in a health journal, how they can sharpen the mind, protect memory. I started eating a handful every morning with my oatmeal. I swear it's made a difference." I blinked. "Blueberries? That simple?" She patted my hand. "Don't roll your eyes. Sometimes the smallest things make the biggest change." Her words lingered with me as Emma and I walked away. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Blueberries, a fruit so ordinary, so innocent. Could something so small really stand against the darkness creeping through my mind? That evening, Emma noticed I was quiet. "Dad, what's on your mind?" I told her about Clara and her blueberries. Emma raised an eyebrow, then pulled out her phone. Within seconds, she was reading aloud, "Dad, listen to this. Harvard studies, the National Institute on Aging, even research from Japan. They've all looked into blueberries. They say the antioxidants, the flavonoids, can protect the brain from aging." I sat back in my chair, stunned. For months, I had been drowning, feeling powerless. And here was something simple, natural, that people had been whispering about all along. Emma placed a small carton of blueberries in front of me the very next morning. "Try them, Dad. Just a handful. Let's see." I picked one up, rolling it between my fingers. The skin was taut, deep blue, almost black. I bit into it, sweet, tart, bursting with juice. It was nothing extraordinary, and yet, as I swallowed, a spark of hope lit inside me. Not a miracle, not a cure, but maybe, just maybe, a chance. And that night, as I lay in bed, I thought about Clara's words. Sometimes the smallest things make the biggest change. Could this little berry really help me find myself again? I didn't know, but for the first time in months, I wanted to find out. The first morning I added blueberries to my breakfast, I wasn't expecting anything. Honestly, part of me thought it was silly, too simple to matter. But I promised Emma I'd try, so I did. I poured them into my bowl of oatmeal, watching the deep blue juice swirl into the creamy oats. A handful, that's all. The taste was fresh, sharp, alive. Days passed, a week, then two. And little by little, something began to shift. At first, it was almost unnoticeable. A lightness when I woke up, less fog in my head. Instead of lying in bed for 20 minutes trying to gather myself, I felt like my thoughts came quicker, clearer. Then one morning, I was sitting in the kitchen when Sophie skipped in, bright as ever. "Morning, Grandpa," she said, her little curls bouncing. Without hesitation, I answered, "Good morning, Sophie." She froze. Her smile widened. "You remembered my name right away." I hadn't even realized it until she said it. But it was true. No pause, no fumbling. Just her name. Simple, but to me, it felt monumental. That same week, Emma noticed too. One evening at dinner, she leaned across the table, eyes searching mine. "Dad, you've been different lately, more alert. What's changed?" I shrugged. almost embarrassed. "It's just a few blueberries each morning, that's all." But inside, I was glowing, because it wasn't just Sophie's name. I remembered small things, the location of my reading glasses, where I had placed the TV remote, even the time of my doctor's appointment without needing Emma's reminder. Tiny victories, yes. But when you've been drowning in forgetfulness, even a breath of air feels like salvation. By the third week, I dared to take my morning walk again. The neighborhood stretched before me like an old friend. I passed the corner bakery, the oak tree where I once taught my son to ride a bike, and for the first time in months I didn't feel lost. I knew where I was. I knew where I was going. It wasn't a miracle. I still forgot things here and there, but the changes were undeniable. My mind felt steadier, like the fog was slowly lifting. And each time I popped one of those little berries into my mouth, I whispered to myself, maybe this is working. Maybe I'm coming back. The best part? My family saw it too. Sophie climbed onto my lap one Sunday afternoon, holding a book. "Grandpa, will you read to me?" I hadn't read aloud in months, afraid of stumbling, of losing my place. But that day, I opened the book and read. Slowly, carefully, but I read. Her tiny hand patted mine. "You sound like you used to." Tears filled my eyes, because in that moment I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. And maybe you know what I mean. Maybe you've had a moment where, after weeks or months of despair, something small shifted, just enough to remind you that you're still alive, still capable of change. For me, it was blueberries, a handful a day, nothing more, nothing less. But it was enough to begin a quiet transformation. And little did I know, the science behind those tiny berries would only deepen my belief. I've always believed in common sense. You plant, you harvest, you work hard, you see results. But I never thought a handful of berries could change the way my mind felt. So one evening, curious and a little skeptical, I asked Emma to look up what the science actually said. I wanted proof. She sat with me at the kitchen table, her laptop glowing in the dim light. "Dad, listen to this," she said, scrolling through an article. "Harvard researchers followed older adults for 20 years. They found that people who regularly ate blueberries and strawberries had slower memory decline, by as much as 2.5 years compared to those who didn't." I leaned back in my chair, stunned. 2.5 years? That wasn't magic. That was measurable. Emma nodded. "And here's another one. From the National Institute on Aging. They studied how the compounds in blueberries, called flavonoids, protect brain cells. They reduce inflammation and help keep neurons communicating." I frowned. "Flavonoids? What's that?" She smiled. "Think of them as the shield inside the berry. They fight the little fires that build up in the brain over time. Too much inflammation and memory gets weaker. But blueberries have this natural shield that helps keep things calm and connected." I sat there quietly, letting the words sink in. All this time, I thought my memory was just fading because of age. But here was proof, scientific proof, that certain foods could actually protect the brain, slow down the decline, maybe even sharpen what was slipping. And it wasn't just Harvard. Emma kept reading. "Dad, in Japan, researchers tested older adults who drank blueberry juice every day. After 12 weeks, their memory improved significantly compared to those who didn't." Blueberry juice. Just 12 weeks. I couldn't help but laugh softly. Imagine that, something so small, something so sweet, and it's doing what pills and treatments couldn't. Emma looked at me, serious now. "It's not a miracle, Dad, but it's real. The studies are here. The science is clear. These little berries support the brain. For the first time in months, I felt something stronger than hope. I felt validation. It wasn't just in my head. It wasn't wishful thinking. There was a reason I was remembering names again, a reason the fog was lifting. It was the blueberries, And maybe you understand how powerful that feels. To learn that what you're experiencing isn't random, that there's real evidence, respected universities, decades of research behind it. It makes you want to keep going, to lean into the change, to believe that the small steps you take today can truly shape your tomorrow. I closed my eyes that night, whispering to myself, "It's not magic. It's nature, and nature knows what it's doing." The next morning, I didn't just eat my blueberries. I began to think about what else I could change, because if something as simple as fruit could help me, maybe other small choices could too. And that thought was the spark that led me to the next chapter of my journey. From that moment on, blueberries weren't just a snack anymore. They became a ritual, a promise I made to myself each morning. I'd wake up, open the curtains, and let the light spill across the kitchen table. Then I'd reach for the small carton Emma always kept in the fridge, a handful of blueberries. Sometimes I dropped them into my oatmeal, sometimes I blended them into a smoothie, and sometimes I just ate them plain, savoring each burst of sweetness. It wasn't just about the fruit anymore. It was about intention. And once I made that one change, others started to follow. I began drinking more water. At first, just an extra glass at breakfast, then one before bed. My body felt lighter, clearer. I cut back on sugar, not all at once, but slowly. I realized that every cookie I refused was another step toward clarity. Sleep was next. For years, I'd stayed up late, tossing and turning, restless in the dark. But now I started turning off the TV earlier. I dimmed the lights, made chamomile tea, and read a few pages of a book before bed. And you know what? I began to sleep through the night. Deep, unbroken rest. Then came walking. I used to dread going outside, afraid I'd get lost, afraid my legs would betray me. But as the fog in my mind began to lift, I found courage again. I started small, just to the corner and back. Then around the block. Soon, I was walking every morning, letting the cool air wake me, letting the rhythm of my steps steady my thoughts. And here's the thing. Each little choice built on the one before it. Blueberries in the morning, water throughout the day. Less sugar, more sleep, gentle movement. It wasn't drastic, it wasn't impossible, but slowly, piece by piece, it was like I was stitching myself back together. Emma noticed it first. One afternoon she said, "Dad, you seem brighter. You laugh more. You're not forgetting as much." I smiled, holding up my empty bowl. "It's the blueberries," I said with a wink, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. It was the sum of all the small choices I was finally making for myself. And maybe you've felt that too. Maybe you've noticed how one simple change can open the door to others, how momentum builds, and suddenly, the things that once felt impossible start to feel natural. That's what happened to me. The fog was lifting. My days were brighter, my steps steadier, my laughter louder, and it all started with one simple fruit. I kept telling myself, the sum of small choices makes all the difference. And as weeks turned into months, those choices began to show results I never thought I'd see again. Months passed, and little by little, I began to notice changes that felt almost miraculous, though I knew they weren't magic at all. They were the result of small, steady choices stacking up day after day. The first big moment came at the park. Emma had invited me for a Sunday walk with the grandchildren. In the past, I'd hesitate, worried I'd get tired or confused. But this time, I said yes without fear. We strolled under the tall maples, their leaves rustling in the breeze. Sophie ran ahead, laughing, while Ethan kicked a ball across the grass. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like an outsider, just tagging along. I kept up. I laughed. I remembered the children's names without hesitation. And when Sophie tugged on my sleeve, asking me to tell her the story of how I met her grandmother, I told it. Every detail. The rain that had surprised us, the umbrella that broke, the way Clara had smiled at me as if she already knew we'd spend a lifetime together. Sophie's eyes widened. Grandpa, you remembered it all." Her voice cracked with joy, and so did mine. Another moment came at church. For months I had stopped going, embarrassed by my forgetfulness. But one Sunday, I walked through those wooden doors again. The familiar hymns filled the air, and as I opened my mouth, the words came, not perfectly, not all at once, but enough. People turned, smiled, nodded, they saw me again. And then there was Christmas. For years, Emma had been the one organizing everything, buying gifts, cooking dinner, keeping the traditions alive. But that December, I surprised her. I baked Clara's old recipe for apple pie, the one Emma loved as a child. I hadn't made it in over a decade. Yet as I stood in the kitchen rolling the dough, the steps came back to me like an old song. When I placed the pie on the table, Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Dad, you remembered." She hugged me, tighter than she had in years, and in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just regaining my memory, I was regaining myself. I could read books again without losing my place. I could recall birthdays without writing them down. I could sit with my family and feel present, truly present, in every conversation. And perhaps most importantly, I stopped being afraid of the future. For so long, I had lived with the dread of fading away, of becoming nothing but a shadow in my family's lives. But now I felt alive again. I told Emma one evening, as we sat watching the sunset, "I don't fear growing older anymore, because I know I can still live. I can still be me." She squeezed my hand and whispered, "Dad, you came back to us." Those words, "you came back to us," were the greatest gift I could ever receive. And maybe you long for that too, to feel like yourself again, to hear your loved ones say, "You're still you. We see you. We need you." For me, that's the miracle that blueberries brought. Not a cure, not perfection, but the return of joy, of memory, of connection. And today, at 85, I can honestly say, I'm not just surviving, I'm living. If someone had told me a year ago that blueberries would change my life, I would have laughed. I would have brushed it off as nonsense, just another old wives' tale. But here I am, at 85 years old, telling you the truth from my own heart. Sometimes the simplest things hold the greatest power. No, blueberries didn't erase every problem. They didn't turn back the clock or make me 20 again, but they gave me something far more precious. Myself, my memories, my dignity. They gave me back mornings where I wake up and actually look forward to the day. They gave me dinners where I laugh with my family instead of sitting silently in shame. They gave me walks where I know exactly where I am and who I am. And maybe, just maybe, they gave me more time with the people I love, not just existing beside them, but truly being with them. I tell you this because I know the fear that lives inside you. I know the shame of forgetting names, the ache of feeling like you're slipping away. I know what it's like to wonder if it's already too late. But let me tell you, it's not too late. Don't resign yourself to fading quietly. Don't believe the lie that you can't do anything to help yourself. Small choices matter. One handful of blueberries, one glass of water, one walk around the block. Each choice is a seed. And seeds, when planted, can grow into something far greater than you ever imagined. So I ask you, friend, from one aging soul to another, do you feel your memory slipping? Do you wake up with that fog in your mind, afraid of what you're losing? Have you ever tried something natural, something simple, that surprised you with its power? Tell me, share your story, because when we share, we remind each other that we're not alone. If this journey of mine has touched you, pass it along. Share it with someone you love, someone who may be struggling quietly, too afraid to speak of their fear. Let them know there is hope, because hope is the greatest medicine of all. And as for me, I'll keep eating my blueberries every morning. I'll keep walking, laughing, and remembering, because today I don't just feel alive. I feel like Antony again.